What's up, everybody? We got a great GoJo and Golic coming up today off an exciting week one in college football. Let's take a look at the slate here. Week one nearly in the books. We'll take a look back at which college football teams made the strongest statement to start the 2024 season. And if we're going to talk about big wins, the Irish went down and messed with Texas A&M and won. So now can we auto-sim to their playoff appearance? And of course, Caitlin Clark adds yet another record to an impressive Rookie of the Year campaign. We'll tap in with all of that and more. Let's do a show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here. No Jesse Cofield today with us in the DraftKings studio in Boston, but we still have a great show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review it. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings network. Rams running back Kyren Williams going to join us in the second hour of the show as we look ahead. Now, Dad, we are officially in week one of the NFL season. Popping up this week, we have got college football reaction from this last weekend to actually get to. We finally made it. Real things to talk about instead of spinning the same storylines over and over again until we're blue in the face. How great does it feel?
I mean, football every weekend until mid-February. I mean, we have made it. It's like I said, the Super Bowl is the greatest time. The day after is still a great time. Then 2 days after the Super Bowl, we all go into football morning, football hell. Even though there's other football things, free agency, the draft, the combine, there's other stuff to follow. It's still football hell that we don't have games, but we've made it back. We've made it back. College football stadiums were full in their first full week over the weekend. Some great games, some head scratchers, everything you would expect to the start of a college football season.
Well, and Dad, you know what? This weekend, because it is Labor Day, and listen, we know a lot of people have the holiday day off, so if you choose to spend some of that time with us chopping it up here, we appreciate you. But because of that, this is college football's big standalone weekend. We've got a game still coming up tonight where Florida State is going to try and get back off the mat after a less than stellar week 0 against Boston College. But that means we also had college football played in NFL stadiums, and we will get to some of the other results from that. We saw, teams like Clemson and Georgia square off early in the Saturday slate. Obviously, the Notre Dame game is something we're going to talk about an awful lot on here. But we had the nightcap last night, Dad. LSU and USC playing at Allegiant, home of the Las Vegas Raiders, out in Vegas for a wild matchup of fan bases in that particular city. But after a lot of back and forth for two teams that walked into this game, Dad, very similar, and I think still walk out in my eyes pretty similar in their makeup heading into this season. USC does get the win. They beat LSU 27-20 in this game, and this one from start to finish, we mentioned the similarities on both sides. Both teams bringing in quarterbacks who are replacing Heisman Trophy winners. Both teams where, you have Miller Moss on the USC side replacing Caleb Williams. Garrett Nussmeier stuck around to replace Jaden Daniels, who was also in attendance for the game last night, combined with defenses with new coordinators that were both huge question marks coming off last season. And we saw improvement from both sides. But, Dad, in your mind, what stuck out to you the most from this game?
that maybe we were selling USC a little bit short. I know it's only week one. And you can't take too much of the good or too much of the bad with it. And with the expanded playoffs, you get a little more of a leash to make the playoffs. But LSU every year has great athletes that go on to the NFL, but they unfortunately play undisciplined at times. They had 99 yards in penalties to USC's 50. They had some personal fouls that hurt them. But I that's what I took out of it, that maybe we underestimated USC. As you mentioned, both these defenses were not just bad, they were awful defenses. And, giving up 27 and 20 points, it was actually decent for these defenses compared to last year. I think what I was watching was the two quarterbacks replacing the two quarterbacks, Kyren Williams and Jaden Daniels, who was at the game last night. These are two guys who haven't gone the normal portal route. They waited their turn for a couple of years, and now they got their chance to start. They both started in bowl games and had big bowl games. They both throw for over 300 yards. But Kyren Hudson, the receiver for USC, he was the star of the night, making one-handed catches. That led to touchdowns at the end that we'll get to. It was incredible. But that's what I took away, that these teams were mostly what I thought, but maybe we undersold USC a bit.
We may have here. I know for me, Dad, it was the quarterbacks both checked the box for me. Like, of the things that, coming off a game where, again, with two teams this similar and with an understanding that, USC offensively, as long as Lincoln Riley is the coach, is going to be able to produce. That's not a side of the ball I'm surprised had success, even if Miller Moss did do things individually that were impressive. And we mentioned 378 yards off 27 for 36 passing. It was an impressive performance, but this is what Lincoln Riley does. And so we kind of, I think, assumed that was going to be the case. But it was that other side of the football. D'Anton Lynn comes over from UCLA with a group that is supposed to be much improved. And Dad, at least in the front seven, looked the part in terms of being more organized, tackling better. Mason Cobb near the top of the tackle count, one of their transfer linebackers, a group that they've heavily portaled on that side. I thought Kamari Ramsey coming down in that safety spot had an incredible game, setting a tone in the box. They still gave up decent chunks of yardage in the passing game, and we're going to see, hey, against upper echelon competition, is that going to bite them against a team that's actually dedicated to the run a little more? Because that's the one thing, Dad. We heard Brian Kelly in the beginning of the game talking to Holly Rowe saying, hey, we got a new quarterback, but we've got this great offensive line. We're going to pound the rock, and then proceeded to only run it 26 times over the course of the game, and the majority of that wasn't really until the second half. There was never really a true dedication to the rushing attack for LSU, despite the fact that you've got bookended tackles that are looking like first-day draft picks. Yep. So from a game plan perspective, I kind of understood it because there were a lot of yards available to you. The pass game was working. Kyren Lacey, their wide receiver, who was tasked with replacing their top-flight guys, looked like a stud in the first quarter and a half of that game, and then it sort of petered out from there. So the offenses are going to work, Dad. It's just right now, USC's defense gets a little bit of the edge because they're the ones who end up winning in this game. And LSU on the other side, we get this, a dose of a very angry Brian Kelly in the post-game press conference, understanding the pressure that's now on his plate as we play the schedule of the game for these two teams after you hear this sound.
We're sitting here again talking about the same things, about not finishing when you have an opponent in a position to put them away. But what we're doing on the sideline is feeling like the game's over. And I'm so angry about it that I got to do something about it. I'm not doing a good enough job as a coach. And I got to coach him better because it's unacceptable for us not to have found a way to win this football game. It's ridiculous.
So, Dad, obvious frustration there, as this is now the third straight opening weekend loss under Brian Kelly at LSU, the fifth straight at LSU overall, and the national spotlight games are tough. Because, Dad, if LSU had lost to USC in the middle of the mayhem on Saturday in college football, it would have, I think, been a completely different tenor. But with these games, when everyone is watching, we're going to go over everything with a fine-tooth comb that they do in this situation and start to overreact. So when you see this LSU loss, Dad, how concerned should Tiger fans be? And are we doing anything in terms of feeling that seat warm up a bit under Brian Kelly?
Well, I think, and you mentioned, the fifth straight time. And back in 20, they lost to Mississippi State, then UCLA, and then under Brian Kelly, Florida State, USC. So they're certainly playing hard first games. They're not doing the preseason warm-up. So I give them credit for that. And as I mentioned, this isn't a league game. This is USC's in the Big Ten, as Lincoln Riley said. That was some great Big Ten football after the win, which made me chuckle. It wasn't a league game, so not an SEC game, and you have more leeway with 12 teams. So I don't think it's worry time. Obviously it's worry time. The worry to me is losing 3 openers in a row. And 5 overall, but 3 under Brian Kelly. As I said, Florida State twice and now USC. That to me is a bit of a worry. So you put yourself in a hole. Now the hole is less deep because of the expanded playoffs,
right?
But the hole is still there. The hole is definitely still there because, listen, they had more plays. They held the ball for longer than USC. As you mentioned, Kyren Lacey had 4 catches in the first quarter and only 3 the rest of the game. So good adjustment by USC there. I don't know if it's worry time or same old start for Brian Kelly. We know they get better, or they'll get better during the year, and they do have a little more leeway, but you have a tough SEC with obviously Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. You got a fairly deep SEC. I think LSU's schedule is relatively favorable. I mean, they play
LSU schedule. They play Ole Miss. They're at Arkansas and Texas A&M, at Florida. They get Alabama and Oklahoma both at home. So it's like everyone else in the SEC. There's a lot of names on there that, depending on how you feel about your team, you can feel good or bad about. This LSU team is someone I could absolutely see getting better, riding the ship, being competitive, and winning all those games. And I could see this team going 8-4 against that schedule if they're not careful also. So that's kind of my hot take coming off of this one, Dad, is that I think both of these teams are going to be pretty good college football teams. It's going to be how soon does that defense gel and really get going on both sides consistently throughout these schedules when both of them are challenged up front in the run game a little bit more, but also likely face less dynamic passing attacks than that. I outside of the quarterbacks where I go check, all right, you've got 2 guys that you can win with. I didn't watch that game last night for LSU and think Garrett Nussmeier was the reason you lost. I think you've got another good one there. He's not going to be a Heisman winner, I don't think, like Jaden Daniels. He lacks that dynamic athleticism, but I think he's going to be a quality enough player for you to where you can go, okay, that's not the reason we're going to lose a bunch of games. Let's go on and keep addressing the other stuff that we need to grow through on this.
And we look at USC. In a couple of weeks, they play Michigan, which was underwhelming, as we'll talk about in their opener. They do play Penn State. And they play Notre Dame at the end of the season. So, no Ohio State. So their schedule is all of a sudden you look at them and you say, okay, nice win. Let's see where they can roll. But I'm with you. I could see a good year, or I could see a couple of more stumbles.
Yeah, USC is the one that becomes interesting because, like you said, with that schedule, there's not really a ton of teams on that group in line to challenge this newly formed defense in a way that I worry about all that much until you get to Penn State and then really Notre Dame at the end of the year. So now all of a sudden, if you're a USC fan, you're allowed to sort of daydream about what double-digit wins could look like, and a conversation we can have later in the show of, hey, maybe did we misevaluate the Big Ten a little bit based on a lackluster start from Oregon in week 1? Nothing like overreacting on a Monday morning. But, Dad, you made the connective tissue, so let's go there because this is one of the teams that Notre Dame plays at the end of the season where now all of a sudden, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're looking and going, hey, this could be a decently ranked win if USC keeps this up by the time you get that tilt in November where Notre Dame might need a win to help a playoff push that now appears firmly on the way. Notre Dame goes down to Texas A&M and gets the win there to start their season as well. They go 23-13 at College Station in a game, Dad, that was billed, Notre Dame going on the road to an SEC opponent. Mike Elko, the former Duke head coach who coached Notre Dame's quarterback Riley Leonard at that stop, tries out his first go at being the Aggies head coach. And Dad, in this one, Notre Dame wins the war of attrition. The defense looked incredible almost all day. Watching a Notre Dame secondary strap it up and play man-to-man coverage for almost an entire night is not something I anticipated seeing much in my lifetime, but look at God, won't he do it? And then offensively, a Notre Dame offensive line with 6 career starts and the transfer quarterback went out there and grinded out a really gritty win, especially on the ground late when they needed it. So I think there's a lot of room to grow, but this was the start you needed, both as a football team, but also, Dad, just vibes-wise. We know with Notre Dame, a lot of these non-con road games against the quality opponents, the big helmet sticker teams, whether it's been Ohio State, Florida State, Clemson, on and on down the list over the years, Notre Dame has been on the wrong side of a lot of those. And so for Marcus Freeman and this team to see the ball go through the basket in a big moment like this, I think huge for building the psyche of this 2024 team.
Yeah, when that game got tied 13-all and A&M had the momentum, you thought, uh-oh, was it going to be another one of those kind of letdowns? And Notre Dame came through. This reminds me of your 2012 team. That team, I think this will be led by defense. Your 2012 team was led by their defense. Hell, that defense was the best in the country. And you had a very efficient offense, both passing and running. I think you averaged over 200 yards rushing and 200 yards passing. And it was an efficient offense. And I think that's what you're going to get here. Not a crazy passing offense. Riley Leonard, they talked about his downfield percentage at Duke was like 23% on balls 20 yards and more down the field. But short and medium, he can hit the mark. His rushing ability, he is a big, tough, strong runner. And early on, Notre Dame could not get that running game going, but they end up with 198 yards. They just lean on you and lean on you and lean on you with a bevy of backs, and including Riley Leonard as a back and running the quarterback powers that they were running. Marcus Freeman going for it on 2 4th and shorts, where they got screwed on the second 4th and short. He definitely made the line on that. But Just the fact that they were going for it and playing the aggressive game. And I'll tell you what, and I know you want to talk about them, that offensive line only had 6 starts combined coming in. They had a true freshman left tackle. They at times had a tough night. But overall, you know, they'll have a, now it depends on how the coaches want to treat it. Like you guys, when you beat Navy in the first game in 2012, you walked out of that meeting like it was a loss. Now these guys are all younger, so I don't know if how they'll treat them in the meetings, but this could be one where they walk out of there feeling like it was a loss. But what a learning experience for them against probably the best defensive line they're going to face this year in game 1. So the arrow is really pointing up on that O-line for me.
There's a lot of room for improvement. Those guys battled their asses off. I give them a ton of credit for that. There was some play. Listen, Nick Scorton on the other side made life a living hell for a lot of guys, and will a lot of guys. This college football season, did it last year in the Big Ten. He's going to do it this year in the SEC. So you're right. Having that week 1 is brutal. Mike Denbrock, we said going into this game, his play calling was, I think, going to be a bigger story than anything else. Mike Denbrock took care of those guys in this game. Jet motion stuff, quarterback run mixed in all over the place. The screen game, short passes to get the ball out of Riley Leonard's hands. Riley did a good job of that. Looked unflappable in this game. There was no jitters for Riley. The moment didn't look too big for him as he understood what was in front of him and said after the game, I knew our defense was going to be able to carry the day, and we just needed to not make the big mistake like Connor Wegman did on the other side, Dad. You look at that Texas A&M team, and Connor Wegman, a guy that when we talked with Trevor Sikkema early this offseason, draft nicks are intrigued by, performed well in a small sample size last year, 12 of 30 for 100 yards and 2 interceptions in this game. He gave the ball back to Notre Dame's offense enough times where they were able to outlast in this war of attrition. So I think you're right. I think the takeaways, Marcus Freeman, year 3 as a head coach, I loved seeing the aggressive decision-making. With a defensive-minded head coach especially, that's the stuff you always wondered about. They put that on tape, so now people know you've got a defense that's ready-made and deep. This Notre Dame defense, college football playoff deep. The offense, we're going to wait and see what they become, but they were what they needed to be that day alongside that defense to get it done here and put them on a path now, Dad, where when you look at their schedule, Florida State, I think will figure it out by the time they get to South Bend, and USC at the end of the season are going to be tough.
Right.
There's Louisville and Georgia Tech in between, but we talked about it. This schedule is absolutely favorable for a Notre Dame team that just knocks an important resume point for their playoff berth.
Yep, my biggest up for them was the offensive line, the youth. Again, as you said, they made mistakes, but they battled, and that running game eventually wore on Texas A&M. And the thing that's going to turn Marcus Freeman's hair gray quicker than anything, man, the penalties. 11 penalties for 99 yards. How about jumping up? You worry about the offensive line and getting the silent count in the noise, but it was a D line getting caught on jumping off sides time and time again. That just the pre-snap penalty just frustrate the hell out of a coach. So the penalties could be a big improvement for Notre Dame. Again, 11 for 99 yards. That's giving up a football field in penalties.
And it's what we always talk about. The biggest improvement for teams is between week 1 and week 2 to start the college football season. So like you said, plenty of areas that they can improve on there. Did Notre Dame make the biggest statement of week 1 in that primetime matchup? We'll talk about that. And sneaky, one of the biggest factors in that game we have not mentioned yet for the Irish that they took down to College Station. Next on GoJo and Golic. Now, Dad, I failed to mention part of my game watching experience this weekend took place in Las Vegas, which was great for a ton of reasons. You know, being able to sit in a million TVs and all these casinos and watch the Saturday slate of games was incredible. But I got into a hairy situation because I am an idiot. Our friend Jessie Cofield is not here today because she had not one but two weddings this weekend in the same place, back to back, which we can't wait to hear about tomorrow. I have never heard of there. That's a scheduling thing we talk about often in college football season. I made the faux pas of agreeing to go to a concert in Las Vegas because I had thought this opening weekend was week 0. I had mixed the dates up in my head months ago when I had planned this out, figuring, oh, I'll have 4 games. I'll check them out when I check them out. And so the problem arose on Saturday night when I'm getting ready to go and see the Killers play in Las Vegas while the Notre Dame game is going on. Literally sitting in the crowd, watching the end of this game on my phone nervously while they're getting into their first song. But Dad, the payoff of watching Notre Dame, again, I'm a lot bigger fan of than you in terms of the three-letter sense of that word. Grew up a Notre Dame fan, played there, thought when I was done I would let it alone a little bit, and instead I go back to the same middle school Mike that I was as a kid every time this team plays on the weekend. And so going into this setting, I didn't like the prospect of having to watch this around a bunch of people in a public environment where I can't do it and be focused. But the feeling of watching Notre Dame go on the road in an SEC team, win one of the big games that have so often become the Achilles heel for us as a program in my lifetime. Watching that happen and then looking up from the screen on my phone and hearing the Killers start to play Mr. Brightside, one of the songs that's defined my lifetime in terms of celebratory moments, my soul almost left my body. In that moment, I realized, I always say fandom is a mistake. It's poison that we allow into our bodies. But in that moment, I remembered why we do all of this in terms of messing with sports to begin with, letting these teams dictate our happiness. Because when the happy is at its happiest, there are very few things that can produce the kind of joy that I felt on Saturday night in that moment before this band played that Caucasian anthem.
Yeah, we were all in the family a little surprised you were at a concert at the end of that game, the end of a close game, or it was close until it was a 10-point game. And just the thought, if Notre Dame would have lost that game, how miserable you would have been in your company at the concert, because we know how much you care. You have broken remotes thrown against walls in hotel rooms as you're getting ready to call your game and watching the Notre Dame game. It's somewhat legendary. So I'm happy for the people you were with that Notre Dame won more than I'm happy for you.
Yes, no, that is 100% the right answer, because I am not my best self. Take that guy you see before the Snickers in the commercial and multiply that tenfold. And that is me not being myself when Notre Dame's losing football games. And thankfully, that's not a problem that I have to worry about coming off this weekend. Dad, there are some teams that have that problem to worry about coming off this weekend. The aforementioned Texas A&M Aggies, not as much urgency for them in year one. Right. Although those images of Connor Wegman throwing up on the field are going to sustain us for a while. Shout out to the Notre Dame strength and conditioning folks for having that team ready to go. We heard a lot about that Texas Heat in week one, and Notre Dame looked like the better conditioned team throughout the entirety. Texas A&M had some guys hitting the mat. Thankfully, not a lot of serious injuries there, but feeling the effects of the environment, and Notre Dame's certainly not a part of that. So a feather in the cap of that group there, Dad, no doubt. But as we look at the rest of this weekend, Dad, big statements made. Let's go all the way back to the beginning here. Georgia and Clemson squared off in a game that ended up not being very close at all. There was a 13.5-point spread in that game, and both you and I picked Georgia and the points, and thankfully we did. 34-3 in that game for Dabo Swinney and company, now looking up from 0-1. So as we talk about with this Clemson team a lot, Dad, was this more Clemson and this roster not being up to par, or in this mind, was this Georgia looking exactly like the number one team they're billed to be?
Well, I mean, I think it's, not to cop out, but I think it's a little of both. We know Clemson is built on their defense. Offense, they were looking for Cade Klubnik to take the next step, which it seems like he's going to be what he is. I don't know if they'll be that next step. It's going to be a team that relies on their defense, and their defense, Georgia held the ball for a little over 5 minutes more than Clemson did. 6-0 game at halftime. The Clemson defense was doing a job holding Georgia to just 6 points in the first half, but Clemson's offense just couldn't find any traction. And then Georgia just put them on them in the second half, outscored them 28-3 in the second half. Showed you why Georgia should be the number one team, and I know it's between them and Ohio State, but why Georgia should be the number one team in the country. And for Clemson, it's kind of twofold. It's they have a great defense. The quarterback position is average right now, so they don't have a lot of firepower there. And it does hit with Dabo Swinney and his architecturally building a roster. And with a lack of one of the new foundations that you need to build a roster, and that's through the transfer portal. I heard a note on the game that he hasn't had a transfer portal starter since 2018. You have to adapt or die, and they're withering on the vine. They, for what they were when they were one of the dominant teams in college, they are not only not that, they are nowhere near that, and nowhere near that anymore. And I listen, I understand Dabo runs a program. Those are his convictions. He doesn't want to bring in portal guys, but it's going to cost you. It's the way of college now. As we said, out of the 68 Power 4 conference teams, 43 have new starters from the transfer portal. And we're going to talk about one in Miami who is maybe, right up there as a Heisman favorite after week 1. So you gotta step up or move aside. And right now, Clemson is moving aside to the tune of not being a very good ball club because of one of the foundations of college football they refuse to do.
Yeah, Clemson, it's so tough for me because to that point about the portal, though, they haven't really needed it on defense. That's not been an issue for them. That defense still looks every bit we said. They had rock fight potential, and for the first half it was, but eventually complementary football takes hold. And if your offense is averaging a literal 3 yards in a cloud of dust the entire day and giving the ball back to Georgia, eventually that's going to give way. And it did for that Clemson defense that I still think is one of the best in the sport, both talent-wise and what they put on wax. Offensively, part of this is also, Dad, a lot of people wondering, the Clemson offense versus Garrett Riley's offense. How much are we getting of that? And structurally, has that offense ever been something that outside of when they've got intergalactically special players has given them a schematic advantage in this day and age in college football where we say, hey, no matter who they put under center at USC, Lincoln Riley's going to have offense going. We feel pretty confident in that. With Clemson, it's almost the opposite where unless they've got a future top 5 draft pick playing quarterback and future first rounders at wide receiver, I do wonder if now in this current form, they can do enough to help the guys on that side of the ball. I think that's the question that still remains to be seen for them. The portal's a part of that, and you could absolutely say, hey, would it have benefited you to try and shop around and see if there was someone better than Cade Klubnik? But there's also part of that, Dad, that yes, Dabo is willingly leaving a tool unused in his belt. It's also something that, if I'm honest as a player, I do appreciate the loyalty to their guys in the locker room because that's something we don't see a lot of. We hear a lot of people pay lip service to that. Dabo actually does live it in a way that is somewhat endearing if you look at it differently. But in this day and age, it does feel like, I'm sure, frustrating for a Clemson fan to feel like we're going into a game with an arm tied behind our back relative to everyone else in terms of roster construction.
Yeah, we're losing portal guys and not gaining any. So I agree with you. It is got to be good for those players in the locker room to feel like that Dabo is being loyal to them. But in the scheme of wins and losses, and as college ball turns more into professional sport, that's what you're basing things on. Now, granted, it's tough when you open up with the number 1 team in the country. And it took Georgia all of a half to figure it out. And Georgia didn't turn the ball over one time in this game. Clemson did one time, but Georgia didn't make the mistakes. And Clemson just flat out got outplayed.
Yeah, that defense is going to give the offense time to adjust against most normal teams, but they took on the challenge that was anything but normal. So we'll try not to overreact too much there. I'm just kidding. We're going to overreact a ton next. Let's take a look at who needs to hit the panic switch next on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. In about a half hour, we got Kyren Williams, former Notre Dame great and current Los Angeles Rams running back, going to stop by and talk about their upcoming season. And in about 10 minutes, we got our all-weekend team because sports besides college football did happen this weekend, and we are going to talk about them. Scotty Scheffler continues to be a rich, rich man, and as we know, Scotty Scheffler's caddy, my dad's favorite fascination, adds more to the hardware case. We'll tell you just how high on the money list that man is going to be. But, Dad, we're talking about statements made this weekend in college football. USC gets the standalone win last night. Notre Dame grabs an elusive road win against a P4 opponent against Texas A&M. Georgia handles their business against Clemson. Looking out at the rest of the weekend, Dad, who would you say made the biggest statement week one that you trust in college football?
Well, I mean, you look at some of the big teams and they feasted on, inferior opponents. You had to look at blue chip matchups. And I look at Miami and Florida, and what we just got off of how Dabo and Clemson don't want to bring in portal guys. Miami brought in Cam Ward. Cam Ward goes 26 of 35 for 385, 3 touchdowns and an interception. That dude, Mike, he's going to have some interceptions now. Now, I had one in the game because he refuses to not throw across his body or roll one way and throw back to the middle of the field. He's fearless. I mean, the amount of times he rolled left and darted it back over the middle, which is the tougher throw for arm strength, was amazing. He is so I'm cool under pressure, nonchalant, whatever the word is. He is just unflappable. And he's got different arm levels he throws at, from sidearm to over the top. It is something. I mean, he was something to watch.
Trying to look as cool as humanly possible. I think that's the thing that stands out with Cam Ward is like those flat-footed little sidearm flips out to the side. When he takes off and runs and scrambles, he'll hit a real slow jog going right towards the sideline like he knows he's got you on a rope. He really is trying to play with max cool factor whilst also hitting every different arm slot you can imagine.
He ran one time. He ran 3 times for 33 yards, averaged 11 yards rush. He ran out of bounds one time when nobody was in like 8 yards of him. But he was just like, I've gone enough, and I'm just going to leisurely stroll out of bounds. So they looked like what we talked about. They lived up to the last 3 recruiting classes, in I believe in the top 10, the last couple of portal classes in the top 10. They have built their team foundationally, the 2 ways you need to build now, in the portal and obviously in high school recruiting as well. And it's showing up. And they look for real. I guess the question is, while it was 2 blue bloods playing, how for real is Florida? And Billy Napier, he's got to be in some trouble. I mean, they just are struggling now. They've Graham Mertz, their starter for a couple of years, got nicked up in this game, and they did put in this true freshman, DJ Lagway, 6'3", 6'4", like 240. What a monster-sized dude. Went 3 for 6, ran for 20 yards. I think averaged 4 or 5 yards a carry. That guy, I was like, what? Now, wait a minute. If your season isn't going to go all that well, you may want to give this kid some time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Graham Mertz in concussion protocol. That was in the 3rd quarter. And so through 3 quarters, or just about through at least a half, Graham Mertz had been 11 of 20 for 91 yards and an interception in this game. It had been ugly, Dad. Both sides of the ball, Miami dictated the terms in this game. And you mentioned on their side, it is this culmination of what you've built towards with this roster. We said this is supposed to be the year for them. And a lot of it still does go through Cam Ward, his ability as a playmaker. That's what he does. He is a playmaker. And yes, that is going to be a double-edged sword at times. But man, you saw he is capable of more often than not coming out on that right side for your team there. So they're going to be in the mix in all the ways we said. I picked them as a playoff team going into this season in the expanded playoff. And now with what we saw with Florida State in week 0, there's absolutely going to be a chance that they could be an ACC title contender type team right alongside them, Clemson and Florida State. They had by far the best weekend of the main Florida teams that we talk about coming out of this game. For the Gators on the other side, this is going to get real interesting real quick. Now, I saw the numbers getting floated around this weekend, and it's worth reminding people that Billy Napier, like a lot of the other big-time head coaches in college football, is a Jimmy Sexton guy, which means that his contract is very well negotiated. And one of the terms in the deal that I believe I saw was, Dad, if they fire him, no matter when, they've got to pay him 85% of what they owe still on the contract. So it would be a whole lot of money to get him out of the paint if you were Florida and feeling that way. Dad, the problem is usually always, though, when your side of the ball seems to be failing, people are going to look at you extra sideways. And for a lot of Florida fans who felt some type of way about Billy Napier maintaining play calling duties, and then you go out and the offense looks like that for the majority of the game, that's not going to instill a lot of confidence in people around there. So much so that their recruits were getting chirped at by the Miami guys. You talk about Cam Ward rubbing their nose in it by jogging out of bounds like he didn't even care about a few extra yards. The Miami players walking by the Florida recruits at the end of the game, telling them don't go here, and basically recruiting them right in front of a bunch of Florida staffers who could do nothing to stop the onslaught, was the perfect summary of what happened there, Dad. Miami went out and flat out embarrassed Florida in a way that now puts the rest of the sport on notice.
Yep, they did. And while I mentioned other teams like, Texas beat Colorado State, Michigan beat Fresno State in a not too impressive way. Ohio State takes down Akron. The other team, did we undervalue Penn State? Penn State taking care of West Virginia in a weather-delayed game. Drew Allar throws for 3 touchdowns in this one. They win it 34-12. They have 2 tough ones on as you look on the way they're playing. They do play USC in October, and then they do play Ohio State. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Michigan this year. So you got to wonder, have they put it together, and can they be part of that? If there's 3 that go from the Big Ten, could it be Ohio State, Oregon? Oregon didn't look that good either, quite honestly.
I was just going to say.
And Penn State.
Well, I mean, first off, I was going to ask, when you say we, if you took up French, because I had Penn State in the college football playoff when we did this exercise before we got to week 1, so mind your manners. But
I might have as well. I forgot who I picked. But yeah, I'm obviously kidding. It's probably the royal we mixed in there, because I think there were a lot of questions, and there still are, quite frankly. Like for Penn State, unfortunately, this is the Stugatsis thing. I'm going to stay all show. It's not quite doing in the playoffs, but it's, hey, you got to do it against Ohio State or Michigan for me to really value this if you're Penn State at this point in time. Right, but they came out and checked the box. Andy Kotelnicki on offense did some of the creative things we had seen at Kansas, multiple quarterbacks used to try and supplement the run game. A lot of the things that went on in there. And against a West Virginia team that's going to be a good group in the Big 12 this year, the weather, all that stuff, it was an impressive performance from them. Dad, I didn't get to see the Oregon game, but only beating Idaho by 10 feels bad when you're a team that a lot of folks had picked to be in the national title picture for this game. So that's when I want to put a pin in there. I want to go and look and see. I didn't see Tennessee versus Chattanooga. I know they put up 1 million points. Everyone loves the quarterback. I didn't get to see it with my own eyes, so I'm not going to lose my mind too much over it. But they are one of many teams that check the box this weekend, right? And I feel like for a lot of teams, Dad, when you're Ohio State against Akron, when you're Michigan against a Fresno team that's going to be a good team in the Mountain West this year, but a lot of these, Alabama putting up in the 60s against Western Kentucky to start the season, you're going out there and trying to check the box. Do we look clean? Are we executing at a high enough level? And then trying to improve from there. And across the board, we saw that Texas as well in that group for a lot of the teams that we expect to be in the dance when it's all said and done. Yeah, and remember, it's a 13-person, voting committee at the end, and even though it's week 1, if you have a good win, a Miami over a Florida, a Notre Dame over a Texas A&M, a kind of big school over big school, a Georgia over a Clemson, that's going to be looked upon better than a Texas over Colorado State, a Tennessee over Chattanooga, a Michigan over Fresno State. It just, teams choose different reasons. Like I said, sometimes they want like that preseason game, that warm-up game, and others just jump headlong into it.
Well, like we saw with Michigan last year, that's a strategy that can work, where you go through a weak non-con, blaze through a largely unimpressive conference slate, but you've got a couple of big enough games before you get to the dance, and then your talent and depth take over despite not having to flex those muscles as much, versus Notre Dame, who with the schedule this year could use a common opponent in a power conference like that as a comparative point, knowing their schedule might not all the way be there. Coming up next, it's all weekend team time. Which performers crack the medal stand for us? Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, busy week one of college football that we're adjusting to, but it's a reminder there's a big wide world out there that we want to celebrate. And so we have our all weekend team here. Honorable mention, second team and first team for the top performers that we saw over the weekend here in the world of sports. And so, Dad, of course, I'm going to kick this off with our honorable mention by talking more about college football and about talking about one of the teams that was a bitter rival for me as a player, but now the reigning national champion Michigan Wolverines had an interesting situation going into this year, obviously not including any of the off-the-field stuff with Jim Harbaugh and signs and things of that nature. They had to replace a great quarterback. J.J. McCarthy now in Minnesota and unfortunately injured for his rookie season, left a vacuum at that important position. So my honorable mention is going to go to Davis Warren, a guy that came to Michigan as a preferred walk-on at quarterback and who also dealt with a bout of leukemia during high school. In 2019, he was diagnosed with leukemia that March, underwent chemotherapy before returning to play 4 games during the 2019 season. His senior year was then wiped out by COVID in 2020, but winds up at Michigan, is in this quarterback battle with Alex Orji, who a lot of people thought might be the guy, but took it all the way down to next week. And sure enough, Sharon Moore trots him out there. Now, both of them ended up seeing the field. Orji had a package out there as well that was a part of this game. But for Davis Warren, he talked about just the range of emotions going into finally making this start after traveling that road. Pretty impressive stuff from that young man. So congratulations to him and his family on that moment.
Yeah, so because a lot of the talk was the thought that Orji was going to get the start and it ended up being Warren. As you mentioned, both played, but Warren getting the start with that background, it certainly adds to the story. My honorable mention is going to be a combination of the presumptive number 1 and number 2 Rookie of the Year awards. That's going to be Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. First, Angel Reese. She broke the WNBA single-season rebounding record on Sunday. It was a loss to Minnesota, but she had 19 more rebounds. She needed 6 to break the record, and she got 19. And the record was from Sylvia Fowles, who had done it, I believe, for 15 seasons she spent in the WNBA. I don't see the year that she said it, but they did it when the WNBA played 34 games. The WNBA plays 40 games now, but Angel Reese did it in her 32nd game. So it was still 2 games before Sylvia Fowles had her record that Angel Reese set her record. So she is now the record holder for most rebounds in a game. And then Caitlin Clark. I mean, Caitlin Clark's going to be your Rookie of the Year. She had 28 points, 12 assists in a win over Dallas on Sunday. That pushed Indiana. Now, she's had the individual accolades of scoring and assists and what she has done. She is going to be the Rookie of the Year. But she is now in that team. Obviously, you got to give the team credit as well. They're over 500 for the first time in 5 years, and they're going to make the playoffs as well. Something they hadn't done, I think, since 2015 or 2016. So not even over 500 in the last 5 years. Now they're over 500 and going to make the playoffs. So the two of these for a long, long time are going to be headlining a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, it's been cool to watch them both go in and accomplish at this level. We've talked about it a lot, but it feels like we hardly ever get a day where it's just one of them doing something and we don't get the chance to talk about the other at the same time. I think, like you said, at this point, with that winning factor in mind, what Caitlin Clark and this team have been since going into the All-Star break and certainly coming out of this in the W, probably going to give her the edge. We also value offense in a way that we just don't a lot of other things, and Caitlin is produced really highly in that level in a way that Angel just does not. So congratulations to both of them, though. Again, going in with such a massive bullseye on their backs and the weight of so much expectation doesn't seem to have bothered them at all. My second team all weekend, Dad, speaking of expectation, goes to Kylian Mbappe. Obviously, the subject of so much conversation over the last couple years about his now transfer to Real Madrid, where he had spent 3 games in La Liga going scoreless and now finally gets off the schneid there. He scores not once but twice in Real Madrid's win over Real Betis on Sunday, and said after the game, I thought this is a great quote, "There's no pressure. It's football. I have my quality, and I'm here to be Killian. There's no pressure. I'm happy. I want to work. Dad, that is exactly the kind of thing someone this young, talented, and rich should say. A reminder, that $150 million signing bonus up front as he comes over to this club as one of, if not the best players in the world.
Well, you got to love when they earn their money, right? That is unbelievable. My second team is going to go to a preseason All-American, so big things were expected out of him. But Arizona wide receiver Teteroa McMillan, what a game he had in a win over New Mexico. So, again, he's a preseason All-American, so the expectation was there. But he had 10 catches for a new school record, 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, Arizona, one of those teams that was thought of that could come over to the new conference, like we said, with Utah and maybe make a splash in the Big 12. But McMillan just had a monster game. Again, 10 for 304 and 4 touchdowns in a win over New Mexico. So, as I said, a lot expected of him as a preseason All-American, but that's going above and beyond. The last 300-yard receiving was Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, put up 347 against Utah in the 22 Rose Bowl. So McMillan with a big opening game weekend.
Yeah, for McMillan, I mean, we know the story of the offseason for Arizona, obviously losing Jed Fish, but retaining Noah Fafita at quarterback, who someone had to throw him all those yards. Fafita, 422 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 pick on the day. That core is enough to build around to make them very scary as the rest of the change for this team takes hold there. So big-time stuff from him there, no doubt. But, Dad, the first team all-weekend pick, I can go nowhere else but Scotty Scheffler, who goes now and wins the Tour Championship, wins the $25 million that comes along with winning the FedEx Cup title this last weekend. He closed with a 467 and a 4-shot win with Colin Morikawa nipping at his heels there. But, Dad, the guy who had started this weekend, this championship run of golf in the FedEx Cup, 3 times as the leader, and the previous 2 times had still not been able to get over the hump, finally does it. I know he hates the format of the tournament. There might be other people that agree with him, but he'll hate it a lot less now with $25 million extra dollars in his pocket, capping, Dad, what we could argue is the best single season of golf that we've seen since Tiger Woods in some of those early 2000s, round 2007, even going all the way back to 2000 itself.
That got to a 2-stroke match, I think around the 9th or the 10th hole, or I think it was the 8th hole, that Scheffler bogeyed and Colin Morikawa birdied. And it put him 2 strokes behind, Morikawa 2 strokes behind Scheffler. And we were like, he had a 7-stroke lead, and it was down to 2.
He shanked that shot coming out of the sand, too. Like, he started to look a little human.
That was it.
And then, as Colin said, he's like, with a guy like Scotty, that's almost going to reset him. And you almost worry when he hits a shot like that because it's never going to compound. It's why, Dad, he's got now one of the best seasons that we've ever seen overall. I think over $60 million in earnings from this year. So incredible stuff for him.
And a quick note on that, his caddy, Ted Scott, his caddy earned $5.2 million. Again, the normal breakdown for a caddy is 10% for a win, 7% for a top 10 finish, 5% for all others. So while Scotty won over $62 million, his caddy took in over $5.2 million. That would have placed him in the top 25 on the money list of actual golfers. He would have been in the top 25 money list. So pretty nice gig if you can get it. My number one for the weekend is a Boise State running back, Ashton Jeanty. I mean, he had now again, it was against Georgia Southern, and they pulled out a 56-45 win, but they needed all of Ashton's running, 267 yards and 6 touchdowns. 6 touchdowns. He was a Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year last year. His coach calls him the best player in the game. He's not going to get any Heisman love because we know it's a quarterback award, though Travis Hunter may have something to say about that from Colorado. But what Ashton did, 6 touchdowns, 267 yards in the opening game win for Boise State was nothing short of spectacular.
Yeah, listen, it's not going to be for lack of effort. I saw Boise State popped his Heisman Trophy campaign video the other day. So they're going to go to work, and with stats like this, you never know what's possible if you get a down year from some of the quarterbacks near the top. It's a long shot, but it would be fun to see for one of the most talented players in the country. If you haven't gotten eyes on him yet, make sure you put eyes on him now. Coming up next, though, we'll talk to another former college running back who made a lot of noise at that level and then did last year in the NFL as well. Kyren Williams with us next. Hour number 2 of GoJo and Golic here. Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. with you guys. And we've talked a ton about college football today. It's been nice having the live games to actually react to again. But we are also now in week 1 of the NFL season. So we get to scratch the itch there. As a reminder, we're going to be in Kansas City on Thursday, along with our buddies Trey Wingo, Stu Gotts, and the God Bless Football crew, and everyone helping kick off the NFL season before opening night as the Chiefs take on the Baltimore Ravens in another night where they are celebrating yet another trophy around there in KC. So as we get leading up to that, we had a chance yesterday to visit with we had a chance to visit with one of our favorite players, former Notre Dame running back, and a guy who burst onto the scene in a big way last year, over 1,100 yards in just 12 games, rushing for an offense in Los Angeles that could be one of the best in the NFL. Running back Kyren Williams joins us here. All right, pumped to get a little more blue and gold in here, although I guess the hues kind of change right now for him in the pros. Rams all-pro running back Kyren Williams, Notre Dame legend, kind enough to join us now here, and getting ready and raring to go. This will be game week by the time we air this. So, Kyren, good morning, man. How you feeling?
I'm great. Appreciate you guys for having me on. You know, it's early morning over in California, but I'm up and I'm ready and I'm excited. Let's get it.
No, not surprising, the energy coming from you. For anyone that's been around you or seen you play, it's a palpable part of your game, man. And I guess I want to start there. You burst onto the scene in a big way last season for this Rams team. So what clicked in year number 2 for you as a pro that allowed you to have such a big season?
I think for me, it was just getting that first year of experience under my belt. Getting that rookie year, that freshman year, whatever you want to call it, out of my system. Being able to see the things that I needed to see. I did get some playing time. I went through a lot of adversity. Having injuries and surgeries and whatnot. So I got to see like the downside of what it is. Being an NFL player. That was my first experiences. Was fighting back battles. And so for me, that second year, it was just let loose. Like I already went through all the mud, what it had to do to get here. I already went through all that stuff. So this year is just you can go have fun and go play ball. And so that was my mentality throughout the whole year was not looking back. I've been in that situation. I don't want to be there no more. So I'm just continue to put that work in to continue to have fun and playing the game that I love.
Was there, go back to 22, you were a 5th round pick. Was there motivation, disappointment at the 5th round and you had the attitude, I'm going to try and prove everybody wrong?
Yeah, exactly. It was all of that. It was mad. It was, excitement. It was work, like determination. Like I had all the feelings. I was blessed to be able to be in the NFL, but the 5th round, that's not where I envisioned myself ever going. I always felt like I was a great player and I did great things. So, when those things happened, that was just, the start of the adversity that I talk about in my career, just having to always battle back and always having to prove myself, and it's been like that since freaking middle school, if you ask me. So, that's just something I always just know to continue to keep working and to continue to keep being who I am because it's always going to shine.
What did Sean McVay tell you through all of that, through, coming in the way you did and then that adversity through your rookie year?
Just staying on it. He didn't really have to tell me much besides just checking in on me because, I just wanted somebody who I know who actually cared, I've been through like a lot in football and just growing up. You find people who just, who kind of just care for you just to be, just because you're that player, because you're a good player. When things aren't going well, they're not really there for you. But that's something that he did. He just kept on checking in and just kept putting that trust in me that this coach he's there. He's here for more reasons. He sees more in me. So that's just he just gave me that little motivation and that little just confidence to keep going and keep getting over what I was going through.
As if you weren't producing enough, now you're adding punt return duties to your resume. What's your thought on that?
It's just to help the team. I'm a team first guy. If that's what the coaches feel as if they need back there, and I'm the guy that is going to fit that role, then I'll do it. I'm gonna put the team before me. That's just who I am. That's who I've been. That's nothing new. So when Coach McVay told me that I was going to do that, I didn't think nothing. I didn't think twice of it. That's just something. It's another way that I can show how effective I am in this game. And so I'm excited for what I have to do when catching punts. I hope we can get some big returns and create explosives in that punt return game.
Hey, I always say football's a simple game. Get your playmakers the ball in space, and life's usually going to be pretty good. And obviously, for you guys in Los Angeles, you are one of a lot of playmakers on this team and on this offense. What do you think is so special about this group that you guys have that really the back half of last season clicked and looked like one of the best units in pro football?
Yeah, I just think we're all built the same, like mentally, physically. We're not gonna, like I said, this is kind of how I explain it. We're not gonna put ourselves above the team. Like we're all working for each other, and we know that if we continue, we knew that last year, and then going into this year to continue, we just play as one and play connected and have fun, and just continue to bring in that energy each and every single game. That we're gonna be better than a lot of teams, and I think we proved that to ourselves the second half of last year, and we just got to continue to keep working on those things and continue to keep believing in those things because this year we have the capability to do a lot of big things, and I'm excited for it.
Not that you care, but do you think analysts are sleeping on you guys a little bit and giving all the love to the 49ers?
I mean, probably, but they were doing the same thing last year, and we surprised them and woke them up. So we're not really worried about what the analysts or anybody else got to say besides what the Rams got to do to be successful each and every week. That's what we're worried about.
I got to see you guys out in training camp a little bit when you were at LMU, and you get a lot of good on good, ones versus ones in training camp. I'm curious how different it felt like going against this defense without 99 on the other side. Aaron Donald retires after an incredible career. You guys have a really young defensive group. So how different was that going up against them in practice and from what you've seen out of them so far?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously different because AD is AD. He's a Hall of Famer, first ballot, obviously, and he just creates disturbances in the backfield when he was there. But it wasn't really much drop off from what AD did to what now Kobe Turner and what now Braden Fisk. What those guys are doing. Those guys are just as hungry as AD was. They continue to keep working. Jared Verse, Bobby Brown, Byron Young, Michael Hoyt. There's a lot of guys who are just hungry and they're just going to get it. And I felt the energy from the defensive line. The spark from this year was a lot different from what it was last year. Like they're coming to play. They're ready. They're keeping their disturbances like AD had. They're continuing to keep doing that. So I'm excited to see what they do as a group, and as individuals, they're going to definitely be an big impact for our team this year.
I'm fortunate enough to call your first game at Detroit. So right out of the gate, one of the teams considered the top team in the NFC. So while every game is a test, how about starting out with Detroit as a big test?
Right. I feel like that's the best way to do it. Start the season off like how we expect how it's going to end. In environments like playing Detroit and playing big games like that. So I'm excited to get back to where it was last year. Get back to where we ended it last year, and be able to write a different story. It's a new year, new team, new goals, and so we're just excited to start the season off. Against a great team like Detroit. Be able to test us as players and test us as a team. So it's going to be good, and I'm excited for September 8th to come.
All right, let's help Dad cheat a little bit then in getting some information going into the first game. One of the newcomers on an offense that's got a lot of great faces. Puka Nacua was lights out last season in his rookie campaign alongside you there. Obviously, Cooper Kupp needs no explanation for what he means to this team. Jordan Whittington, one of the new faces on this offense. What has he brought to this unit, and how does he fit into your guys' plan of attack on offense this year?
I feel like he just fits, like I said, as who we are as people, as players on this offense. We're just physically and mentally, we're ready to go, and that's just who he is. Coming in as a rookie, you couldn't tell that he was here. He hasn't been here for a couple of years. He's in the walkthroughs, he's making sure he gets the reps 10 yards behind Cooper and whatever position that they got him at. And so, I just see the stuff that he's doing as a rookie, and I'll be like, man, he's already given, he's been here for, a couple of years. So I'm excited for what he has in store. He's a great player. He showed that during the preseason. He's shown a lot during practice. And so, like I said, it's going to be fun to be able to see what he does because, he's built just like everybody else on this offense that mentally and physically ready just to go and go to work and, do it for the team.
You guys do not lack weapons on offense. How about another thing? I'm not sure how much you care about, but it's huge in the country, and that's fantasy football. And you have become a real fantasy football go-to guy. Do you hear that from fans at times?
Heck yeah, I hear it all the time. That's like my rookie year. I had no idea fantasy football was a thing. You couldn't tell me. Nobody came up to me ever talking about fantasy football, and then it was about halfway into last year, it's the only thing people can talk about is fantasy football. I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot that thing. I forgot that was even a thing. So, I'm excited that, I'm able to, win people their leagues, help them be successful in whatever they got going. So, it's definitely cool he's seeing and hearing the things that people have to say about fantasy football.
I was going to say, do you want to give a State of the Union address to the Kyren Williams Fantasy Nation out there that, hey, this punt returning stuff, Blake Corum, we're still going to be all good this season. There's plenty of great stuff coming on this front.
Oh yeah, man. Don't ever worry about that. You guys if you didn't have me on your waivers before I got hurt last year and you picked me up, you know what I can do. So don't even worry about what we got going on. We going to continue to keep doing what we do.
All right, there we go. So good things in the future for everyone there who bought stock early and now gets to enjoy the dividends on the back end here. We've talked about all the parts around him. I do want to get to your quarterback in Matthew Stafford, who feels like he's been perennially one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL, came over and won the Super Bowl, and now seems to be getting more of his due. So when you're on the field with Matthew, you've talked about the selfless nature of everyone in this offense, but in terms of what he can do on the field as a football player, what do you think separates him from so many of his peers in the league?
Man, he knows the game inside and out. You know, he talks football, he knows football, he sees football, and that's just who he is. I mean, that's just who he is as a player. And it shows that on the field. It's to be able to, his arm angles that he throws that, to be able to fit the balls in tight windows and be able just to get it over the defender to his open receivers. And things that I've seen since my rookie year have been crazy, man. I've never seen a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, and I'm blessed to be able to experience that early on in my career, because now I know like just what it looks like to be a Hall of Famer. When I know like closely, I know what it looks like. You know, I'm right there with them in the meeting rooms and then on the field, and you know, I'm hearing this conversation with Coach McVay, and so like he's just setting an example for all of us each and every single day. So it's definitely cool and be able to realize that and see that and just be able to play next to him is cool, because he's like it's like a coach on the field. He's gonna tell me where the blitz is coming before it comes. So, you know, he knows, he sees and he knows everything.
While you have a lot of time left in the league, Father Time always wins. Matthew Stafford is 36, so is there a feeling of we gotta get back to where we were a few years ago, back to the Super Bowl, while Matthew's still doing his thing?
I mean, I think that's the case every time Matthew is a quarterback for a team. You know, that he has that capability to do that, and I feel like we have the team to be able to do that around him. So that's why I say I'm excited for this year, because we have a lot in store. We have a lot of capabilities to reach, and we have things to do. So I think with a great quarterback like Matthew leading us, it's not going to be an easy road, but it's going to be a less paved road for sure. But I'm excited for it, because you know he's a great leader and he knows what it takes.
All right, we've gotten all of like the big picture questions out of the way. I need to nerd out with you for a second, because I've talked to plenty of people about this. I think already you're the best pass protecting running back in the NFL, and that's been true going back to your time at Notre Dame. It always seems like something you've taken an immense amount of pride in. So where did that come from, and wanting to and going out and doing that at such a high level? And what is the key in your mind to being a great pass protector as a running back working with that offensive line?
For me, it's just, man, we're playing football. So if you want to be a running back, you got to be able to do three things: be able to run the ball, catch the ball, and block. And so that's 1/3 of what I got to do to be a great running back, a successful running back, and be the person that I want to be. And so for me, early on in college, like I remember my first time pass blocking in college, I was just like, I don't want to do this. You see how big them linebackers are? I'm a baby freshman. I'm 17 years old, about to go pass block Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I'm like, man, I do not want to do this. But then when I got up there and I did what I had my rep, and I realized, man, it wasn't that bad. That's when, you know, for me, it was just like football now, you know. And so I remember the Clemson game my sophomore year. That's when the pass protection really came to life. That's when I was feeling it in the games, knowing what it looks like to see a blitzer, a backer blitzing, what his eyes look like, what if he's leaning on his toes because he can't hold it. You know, I started to see those things and pick up on those things in that game. And then ever since then, you know, I can just key in, and when I know where the slide is going, I can key on my backer and see where his eyes are looking, see how much weight he has on his toes, or if he's playing on his heels, and to see if he's blitzing. But for me, the mentality of it is you got to protect your quarterback, man. We need that guy behind us standing up all the time in the game. So it's the mentality. It's a mentality. You know, I want to want to. You gotta want to be able to do that. So for me now, it's just I'm playing football, and I'm a knock in your nose before you knock me. So.
Yeah, that's where I was going to ask. You know, I think of it as kind of like rebounding in basketball, where there's technique and there's skill, obviously, as you mentioned, looking at feet, looking at eyes. But then how much of it is actual just want to? You know, the guy wants to get the rebound. You want to stick your nose in somebody's chest.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the biggest thing. Like, you know, you're about to get hit. So are you gonna embrace it, or are you just gonna take it? So, you know, that's a decision and a want to, if you know, as a football player, as a running back, that you got to have to make that decision before you step on the field.
No, there's no doubt about it. And you mentioned that Clemson game. It is, to this day, man, one of the single best pass blocking games I've ever seen from a running back or anyone else. It was pretty awesome to watch. So, dude, we could sit here and talk to you about this all day long, man. This has been incredible. I know you got something going on here with DirecTV. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, man, I partner with DirecTV for business because you guys obviously know I'm from St. Louis, playing out here in California. My games aren't broadcasted normally at home. And so DirecTV for business, they partner with 300,000 local bars all around the world. So my family back at home in St. Louis, they're able to just to go to their local bar, ask the bartender to turn on the Rams game, and boom. My grandma, she calls me all the time. Just when the games that she's not able to go to, she'll call me all the time from the bar and flip the screen on after the game and just be able to show me the highlights and stuff like that. So now it's definitely cool being able to, you know, partner with somebody who I know directly affects my family back home, and he allows them to be able to still support me from being a long way at home.
Oh, grandma hanging at the bar. That's very cool.
Love that.
Yeah, grandma and grandpa, yeah. She told me they drink water though, so they don't get too excited.
Okay, I was gonna say they're getting enough juice watching you play. They don't need any extra stuff in there to get them hyped for game day. So awesome
Exactly.
that the folks at DirecTV Business are helping make sure that the family can all watch you play. We're all excited to watch you play as well. Kyren, can't thank you enough for the time this morning, man. Best of luck this season, and go Irish. Hopefully we'll talk to you again
Appreciate
soon.
you guys, yeah.
Awesome stuff from Kyren, who no doubt now wakes up for the rest of this week and can bask in the glow and talk you know what in the locker room about the fact that his college football team took care of business. I feel like that's an underrated part of NFL locker rooms that most people don't realize is how much time, it's like in college, you spend a lot of time talking about hypothetical matchups that could have happened between your high school teams. Then you get to the NFL and you just do that with college matchups and bet rampantly on the outcome of them. Not, you know, in the official way that gets everyone in trouble. Usually it was just money changing hands among players, but who knows what you can even do with that anymore now.
Or in the case of, I remember we had a road game when I was with the Eagles, and Reggie White obviously went to Tennessee, the late great Reggie White, and they played Notre Dame, and the game started right as we got, basically the game was going on as we got on the plane, and Notre Dame, I believe was winning, and we ended up landing and finding out Notre Dame lost to Tennessee, and no money exchange hands. I had to wear like a Tennessee type of a hat and sing Rocky Top on TV. So that's the bet I had to pay off. But there are definitely bets that go on amongst the college players in NFL locker rooms for sure. And also, as I mentioned there, I'm fortunate enough I get to call this Rams-Detroit game Sunday night for Westwood One. I'm really looking forward to that matchup.
It's a banger to start the season off. The Rams been a little bit banged up, speaking of that, during training camp in a way that's got me worried. I bought a lot of Ram stock this offseason that I would like to see pay off. But the Lions now, they got to show out this season, show this season that the standard is now the standard and that they are legitimate Super Bowl contenders. First rattle out of the box, going to be a tough one there. Coming up next, we'll get some other news out of the division next on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. Our thanks to former Notre Dame running back and Rams running back Kyren Williams for stopping by before. But, Dad, scary news elsewhere inside the NFC West over this weekend for 49ers rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, who, as a part of an attempted robbery on Saturday afternoon, was shot in the chest. A statement released by the 49ers said that he was in serious but stable condition after sustaining that bullet wound after a 17-year-old male from Tracy, California, was arrested as the suspect in that robbery. Pearsall's mother said on Sunday in a social media post that the bullet exited out of her son's back and missed his vital organs, and that he is extremely lucky, Dad. He was on the way to an autograph signing when, unfortunately, this incident took place. So, incredibly scary moment, but the good news, as we said, stable condition. The bullet missed his vital organs, and it appears that he's going to be okay. I have no idea what it's going to mean in the football sense, and that is so secondary right now that we don't care. But in an off season where, we're finally towards the end of this, and we talk all the time about regular injuries that pop up before the season, and we will do that with Mark Andrews here in a second. Just an incredibly humbling reminder of how real it can get sometimes.
Yeah, this was at 3:30 in the afternoon. I mean, this was right by Union Square area, in broad daylight. And there was just the one gun involved, and there was a struggle with the gun and the suspect. And as you mentioned, a couple of shots went off. There was actually video of Pearsall walking to the ambulance. I mean, dude had a bullet through his chest. I mean, the luck of it not hitting anything important, any important organs in your body is just incredible. To go through his chest, you saw the blood on the side of by his pec. I think more on the right side, obviously, with the heart being more to the left, and that's just stunning to me. Stunning. And again, it's completely secondary, but have no idea when the guy could get back on the football field. But I would imagine he and his family aren't even thinking about that right now. Just thinking about how lucky he is to have survived this.
It's crazy that this is we're 2 years removed from this happening. Remember, to Brian Robinson, the Washington Commanders running back who got shot in the leg, and then 6 weeks later played in a football game that offseason as a part of a robbery or a carjacking out near where he was there. So, it's a good reminder. I mean, God, I remember when I was in Pittsburgh as a rookie, Mike Adams, one of their left tackles, got stabbed over on the south side of Pittsburgh. Like, you're not immune to this stuff just because you're a guy with NFL next to your job description by any means. For some guys, being that big or people knowing you have money can make you a target. It sounds like this might have been a little bit more random than that. But either way, certainly happy that Ricky Pearsall is okay, going to be able to walk out of this fine, and then we'll wait and see again what this means on the football portion of things for him at some point down the road once we got more information. But, Dad, someone else who was in an accident, now this far different, doesn't involve gun violence, thankfully, but Mark Andrews was involved in a car accident about less than a month ago, and now has declared himself good to go for the opener on September 5th here. He had missed and been held off the practice field for 16 days, though, Dad. I remember when this story came up at the time, it seemed like they really tried to downplay the severity, but being off the practice field for that amount of time after this clearly indicates there was probably more than met the eye at the original reporting of that.
Yeah, I was surprised when I had just naturally thought he was back, practicing with the team. And then to hear he went back to practice after 16 days off the field. They said it was a scary accident, but didn't realize and we still don't know. I mean, it was definitely kind of downplayed as far as injury was concerned or why he was off the field for those 16 days. Bottom line is he's healthy and he'll be ready to go in the opening game against Kansas City. For different reasons, the other great tight end in this game missed the first game last year, and Travis Kelce hyperextending his knee in practice the week of the game. And I didn't even think the Mark Andrews playing time would be a situation at all until this report came out.
Now, he maintains, as does John Harbaugh, that he missed practice time with was not a result of the injury suffered from the accident. John Harbaugh about a week ago said Andrews was dealing with a, quote, very minor thing that kept him out of practice after the accident. So the Ravens camp making it clear on their end they don't believe that this is related to the accident at all. Mark Andrews mums on that because it sounds like there's some stuff going, normal car accident stuff outside of, hey, I have to also be a professional football player that uses this body to go out here for this game. So, and Dad, that's huge for the Ravens going into this matchup, knowing that regardless of what's kept him off, that he'll be back on, because while that offense learned to subsist without Mark Andrews the back half of last season, and we saw Isaiah Likely obviously make a huge jump in his career as the other tight end in that group who became the guy, more 3 wide receiver sets for a team that was in its first year with Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator, starting the season off against this Kansas City Chiefs defense, you're going to want to have the full arsenal ready to go, especially because, as we've talked about, that new offensive line is going to have Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, and all those dudes with their ears pinned back. So they're going to need all the help they can get from the skill players on this offense.
Yeah, and this is a heavy install day for Baltimore, both Baltimore and Kansas City. Remember, their game's Thursday, so that's like a Monday is like a Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday for these two teams as far as install and a hard, I put that, under air quotes, hard practices where most teams will start like Wednesday with their game installed. They're certainly doing stuff today, and normally Tuesday is a day off for players, but it's all subject to change with different teams. But normally Wednesday and Thursday are your heavy install days, and we're in those particular type of days for both Kansas City and Baltimore and preparing for their game Thursday night.
It's pretty incredible. This game, Kansas City getting the home favorite as the 3-point favorite in this one. But that tells you that the odds makers look at this and see it as a pretty even matchup for a Baltimore team that we know lost a ton on defense. Zach Orr taking over as the coordinator for Mike McDonald that's gone there. All the newness on that offense for the Ravens going up against the team in the defending champion Chiefs, where, Dad, it almost feels too good to be true. Like, I don't know if you get this vibe every once in a while and thinking about the 2024 Chiefs, who are the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions, who went into last year with major question marks about receiver pretty much the entirety of the year that they never fully got figured out. It was enough to get them over the hump, but that was a team led by defense. Now this offseason, they add young youth at offensive tackle. They add speed at wide receiver with Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, and maintain the vast majority of the pillars that have made this team great. And now all of a sudden it's got me going, all right, is this the time to sell? Am I missing something here? Because having a team that accomplished that much last year seemingly get better and faster in the areas they need to feels borderline unfair.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, Pat Mahomes talking about how it wasn't much fun last year and they won the friggin' Super Bowl because the offense didn't lead the way. The pride and the of the offense leading the way, he was bummed out about because they didn't. It was a defensive-led team. So they did get some shiny new toys, especially the speedy wide receiver and Worthy. And I'm interested on Baltimore's side. Now, we know Baltimore will run the ball. They run the ball more than they pass the ball. And because of Lamar Jackson, but just how much Derrick Henry will be used as the hammer. I mean, this is going to be odd, seeing Derrick Henry not in a Titans uniform, see him in a Ravens uniform, and see him just toting the ball and just being the man that he is running the ball. That's really the newest, biggest addition to both these teams.
Yeah, I think for me, it is kind of that fascination. Obviously, that'll be a huge part of the headline here, the new faces in new places on both of these teams, but then also what this Ravens offensive game plan does look like with that in mind. We talked about it in a very similar but different way for Notre Dame this past weekend, where you had all this new coming together and the offensive line was a question mark. How are they going to scheme around that or with that in mind? At this level, you've got enough guys that have been a part of winning here in Baltimore still in the DNA of that group, but how is Todd Monken going to use all of those pieces at his disposal now with a healthy Mark Andrews and Likely to try and make life for some of the young pieces, especially on his offensive line, make life a little bit easier for them against a defense that was the reason Kansas City won the Super Bowl last year. So plenty of time to look ahead to that. We'll be in Kansas City as part of the kickoff for the season in that. But Mark Andrews, the good news coming out of the day for the Baltimore Ravens. Coming up next, a little early look ahead to Week 2's college football slate here on GoJo and Golic. right, Dad, we get to put a bow on college football's week 1 tonight. We got one game left on the long weekend. Boston College on the road taking on Florida State, who obviously in week 0 suffered the biggest loss that we talked about from that weekend to Georgia Tech over in Ireland. They got their chance at redemption. So, Dad, why don't we make this cash it or trash it for us here today? Cash it or trash it is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about what DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. All right, Dad, Florida State, big favorites, 16.5-point favorites at home against BC with Bill O'Brien back at the reins. If you missed that somehow this offseason, the former Patriot coordinator, then Alabama coordinator, now all of a sudden, and former, I should say, Penn State head coach as well as Houston Texans head coach, now in the driver's seat for the Boston College Eagles. So, Dad, do you think Florida State can go back here and rebound in a big way after a week of practice?
Yeah, I do. I mean, they have to be so stung after that loss to Georgia Tech in Ireland. Just to have it be, you know, in their conference. I mean, just a horrible way to start out. So I gotta believe they have the talent. But they're putting together the pieces, and I think as the season goes on, they get better and better. And I do think it starts tonight against BC. So yeah, I think they cover.
16.5 is a lot of points for me on this one. I think I might side with the BC plus 16.5 just until the Florida State offense proves to me that they can go downfield consistently. Now, I don't really have much in the way of a scouting report on the Boston College defense, but what I will say, Dad, is part of what was difficult for Florida State last week was Georgia Tech, entirely new defense, defensive structure for that team. First look at it with that personnel Florida State got. So a lot to adjust to on the fly. For Boston College, it's not going to be the defense, but on offense, Bill O'Brien's going to come over here and put his stamp on that offense. You've got a quarterback in Castellanos that's just active enough as an athlete, as a passer, to be someone that could be trouble if you're not fully prepared for what you're going to be looking at offensively. So that new combination of head coach and quarterback is just interesting enough for me to say, hey, maybe BC can keep this thing close.
It's BC's first game. It's Florida State's second game. You see massive improvement usually from first week to second week. So I see that in Florida State.
You do. All I'll say is different animal coming back from Ireland to someone that lived this experience coming back after a huge win. We got the win week 1 in Ireland and then came back. It takes a little bit for the body clock to adjust off that one. We were sluggish rolling into that next outing. Now, they've had a few extra days playing in the Monday of the holiday weekend, which should help some. But I think we beat Purdue by like 2 points coming back off that. And that was not a juggernaut Purdue squad by any means. So I'm just worried a little bit of the lethargy coming off of that trip overseas, combined with the fact that BC could be an interesting offensive animal this year under Bill O'Brien. And again, Thomas Castellanos, who's an incredible athlete, really sudden. I think will do good in some of the RPO stuff that Bill likes to have in his offense. So I'll take BC plus 16.5 and say Florida State's got to prove to me they can put up big points in a game before I'm going to go too far outside of myself saying that they can win by almost 3, win by 3 scores in this game. So I'll go that way there. But, Dad, that's just one of the games now. That's the end of week 1. But it feels like also the start of a new week. Is there anything after week 1 that you saw in college football? A team performance where you're already saying, I want to see what that looks like again in week 2 as we do a quick look ahead to the week 2 slate?
Well, I think everybody's going to point to Michigan and Texas, right? At Michigan. Is Texas, they beat, they have a walkover game, and Michigan has kind of a close game. They pull away from Fresno State, but kind of a close game as Texas shuts out Colorado State. Is Texas for real with their firepower on offense? I think they are. And we talked about Michigan rebuilding their O-line, rebuilding a quarterback, rebuilding in a lot of spots. Eventually rolled Fresno State but it took a little bit of time. So are we going to see that improvement from Michigan from week 1 to week 2? And are we going to continue to see the firepower by Texas, even though it was against an inferior opponent in Colorado State? So that to me, between that one and Tennessee, which really had a big game against Chattanooga, and North Carolina State beats Western Carolina, 2 ranked teams, is the quarterback for Tennessee, Nico, the real deal. North Carolina State, who we are kind of like on the verge of, could they do something in the conference this year? It's a big test for both teams in week 2.
Yep, that's certainly going to be a big one. And I think, like you, I'm intrigued now by Tennessee and what they can become. Obviously, Josh Heupel and that offense are such a proven commodity that if this quarterback is as talented as people say, they have the chance to do something pretty special there. The other one, obviously, that everyone's going to be focused on is Colorado and Nebraska. This is a game that Nebraska's had circled on the calendar for a while in terms of revenge. And we talk so much about Colorado's first win the other weekend, Dad. For Nebraska, Dylan Raiola coming out this weekend, 40 points in a win for that team, albeit over UTEP. But the offense looked like you would expect with a young player as talented as Dylan is going out there and cosplaying Patrick Mahomes. So I think that one's certainly going to be the sexiest matchup of the weekend in terms of selling that. But I'm with you, Tennessee against the opponent in NC State that is actually a Power 4 opponent, whether or not NC State is actually going to be quality. And they struggled for versus Western Carolina for a little while in their first game. I think going to go a long way. But that Colorado-Nebraska game is going to feed families based off the outcome one way or another.
Yeah, it is with the true freshman quarterback and just the Colorado, the hype show, and the fact that you have 2 great players in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. I mean, they are legitimate first. I would imagine first rounders. Certainly, Travis Hunter is. Shedeur, I know some have him in the first round, some don't, but I think he is a first round talent. And what they could do individually with awards for the end of the season. I still think the team overall is going to struggle to get to 6 wins. Remember, they started out great last year, beating TCU right out of the gate, and they were the belle of the ball until they weren't. And now they have to prove again that they are. And this is a big test against the Nebraska team with again a true freshman quarterback, but one who has come in with a lot of hype and delivered at least in week 1.
Can I offer you 2 interesting matchups of G5 versus P4 heading into this weekend that I think might be of interest to some people in terms of helping us find out about opponents? 2 of the favorites to be the highest ranked group of 5 team potentially before the season included Boise State and App State. And both of them have huge games coming up this weekend. Boise going on the road is an 18.5-point dog right now on DraftKings Sportsbook against an Oregon team that looked shaky against Idaho in week 1. And then App State going to Clemson, 17-point dogs on the road there for a Clemson team that's going to be licking its wounds and wanting to show itself. And so, Dad, obviously a huge opportunity, as we know. The upset for either of those teams would go such a long way in that jockeying for position to be the highest ranked group of 5 conference champion that would get the automatic bid into the college football playoff. But as much as anything else, you talked about that difference in week 1 and week 2. Clemson and Oregon both seem like teams that on paper are very much in line for that and desperately needed to keep their playoff hopes alive.
Yeah. Obviously, Boise State and the guy I had as my first team all weekend, Ashton Genty. I mean, rushing for 6 touchdowns and over 260 yards. You'll know they'll want to just pound the ball with him. Obviously, control the clock and keep that Oregon offense off the field. And App State's going to be tough for them to score on that Clemson defense. That could be a tough road for them.
Yep, they got to win in week 1 over East Tennessee State, an FCS opponent, 38-10. So good one on the board there, but just a little appetizer sampler as we look longingly towards week 2, because this week we got some information. We're not quite in the offseason anymore, but based on the opponents, we're only going to know so much. Next weekend, we start to see trends develop, and that's when we can really start to sink our teeth into what the 2024 college football season is going to look like, who's going to contend in this new world playoff order. As much as anything else, is your team going to suck or not? Because we all want to know the answer to that. Yeah. Coming up next, we'll finish the show off the way we always do with this, that, and the third, including maybe the best nickname of the year and a wellness check on our friend Jesse Cofield here on GoJo and Golic. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, all those fun places. If you miss us live for whatever reason or our great guests, thank you to Rams running back Kyren Williams for joining us earlier today. You can catch that interview in its entirety wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Dad, let's get to this and start things off. First weekend of college football is back, and there's tons of great things about it, tons of meme-worthy content, tons of great wins for teams already. But let's add a nickname into the pile right now. FAU got back onto the field this weekend, and their safety, CJ Hurd's nickname hit us in a very special way. Chris Vanini from The Athletic pointed out that his nickname was the Sea Snake, which, if you haven't watched it already, a reference to Corliss Valerian from House of the Dragon. And Dad, a sick look, especially leaking out of the helmets. I miss having hair to begin with, but the look of dreadlocks coming out of a football helmet, one of the premier aesthetics in all of college football. So quality look here. And are you caught up on House of the Dragon yet?
I am not all the way caught up. I still have a couple more to go to finish the season, but I'm definitely into it. But yeah, the dreadlocks coming out of the helmet and then blonde, making them blonde as well, like Corliss Valerian, the head of House Valerian. I think it's a cool look. I think it's a great nickname. I love the guy on House of Dragons who plays him. I think it's all around neat, and as long as he didn't give himself the nickname, we're cool.
Yeah, that's always interesting. And like, again, GoJo's the only nickname I've truly ever had, and it was given to be my Mike Ryan and the Lebitard crew just because there were too many mics in the room and we had to abbreviate it somehow. So I've never had that. You've never had a nickname ever, have you?
No, I have never, ever had any kind of a nickname at all.
I am stunned given the fact that for a while you maintained status as the only white guy on the Eagles D-line for at least a year, if not more. There's a picture in your den that I believe is signed by the rest of the group in there as you were the only white guy in there. I figured that was easily going to get you some sort of nickname.
Yeah, I never... I'm trying to think back. I was called some nasty things, but those weren't really nicknames. Those were just nasty things. I've never, I can't even make one up. I've never had a nickname. Boy, that's kind of boring, isn't it? I've never done anything that was worthy of a nickname.
Now you see why I wasn't going to call you 9-0 or the GOAT or anything like that when LeBron brought that up the other day. I'm just calling you Dad because at this point we haven't figured out anything else to try and call you there. So no nicknames for us here, even though I guess GoJo technically counts for that. But Dad, hope that we've got as we move on to that and look ahead to what might be coming up this season. And something that I called months ago during the course of last football season and that now we have actually heard from inside has a chance of becoming real. Patrick Mahomes, in an interview over this last week, joked that Taylor Swift has actually been drawing up plays and the Chiefs might put one in. Dad, Andy Reid, famously on this team, is someone that takes play solicitations from everybody here. Stories of people drawing them up on cocktail napkins or coming to him with a walkthrough because Andy wants everyone to feel like they have ownership of the offense. And so I said last October, I will not be surprised if the Chiefs run some insane red zone play that obviously would feature Travis at quarterback to score a touchdown that Taylor Swift has given to Andy Reid. And lo and behold, it seems like we're finally already there. So I'm not surprised. Dad, are you looking forward to what will surely be a marquee moment for the NFL and its new fan base?
I love Andy Reid, how he does this. Now, how much he actually puts it into practical application of the actual play or maybe a variation of the play. Part of the play drawn up is in there, but then it's a normal play otherwise. I don't know. But hey, Taylor Swift's involved, so have at it, right? I mean, she's involved. She's as popular as can be. So her name attached to a play, especially if it's a successful play, to her boyfriend would be incredible.
If it's a successful play, come on. This woman is one of the most accomplished writers, gifted creators there is. And you think after a year of digesting high-level football, by the way, like lest we forget, her and the Swifties came over during an incredible season for this Kansas City Chiefs team, albeit maybe not for the offense. She's been around Andy Reid. We've seen plenty of the moments between them on podiums. I'm sure she's internalized enough of this, the fact that her brain just works different and better than ours, that she'll be able to come up with something wonderful in the red zone. I was kicking this around the other day. Maybe you can go, why shake it off, throw to the blank space, something like that. Red, there's obviously a bunch of things in there. You go 22 personnel. You do it from the 13-yard line in the red zone. There's all sorts of numbers we can hit for this.
Well, I mean, that's fine outside of an actual play call, an actual play that she drew up. If you want to call it something associated with her songs, great. But do you think she's going to draw up a play that Andy Reid hasn't seen?
Yes. Andy, how many Grammys does Andy Reid have? How many number one Billboard songs does Andy Reid have? This is a perspective he has not considered. And I don't say that to shame Andy Reid. I'm sure in an alternate universe, if the Chiefs offensive line did a Christmas album like the Eagles offensive line did a Christmas album, they would probably loop Andy in. And I'm sure he would come in with some sort of very lovely tenor that would rock all of our worlds. But until that moment happens, this is a perspective he has not considered. That's why he invites more minds into the process for all this. And I'm sure she'd be able to come up with something that he hasn't seen. Because Andy Reid would never have written Christmas Tree Farm, but here we are with that existing in the universe. So yeah, I'm sure there's a possibility of that.
I don't even know what to say other than you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's just
no,
not.
I was going to say, you know what? You've been defeated in combat right now. You need to accept your place in this and understand that you're wading into waters that you can't fully comprehend right now. This is my dojo, Kemosabe, and we are here. We are living in this. We're going on year 2 in this universe right now, where I am in the center of the Venn diagram, getting ready to watch my hopes and dreams play out in front of that field. And you are not going to stand in the way of that with your doubts and your naysaying and things of that nature. Dad, let's get to the third here and save you from yourself.
Thank you.
And drowning in the deep end of this pool. Our friend Jesse Cofield, who normally joins us here as our leg in the DraftKings studio in Boston, was not here because she had not one but 2 weekends this long holiday weekend. Back-to-back weddings. This was the update we got from Jesse as she was at wedding number 2 yesterday. Dad, have you ever seen anything like this? I had a stretch in summer of 2016 or 17 where I did 3 weddings in 3 weekends, back to back to back for that. But I had space in between to recover, albeit it was still a war of attrition. I have never in my life, and I've attended a lot of weddings, heard of someone doing 2 in 1 weekend, pulling the doubleheader. So how do you think you would fare for this? What would your strategy be? What are your thoughts on the 2 weddings in 1 weekend?
Well, I have never done a Sunday wedding, and I would imagine it's because that's the only day a couple could get the venue that they wanted or whatever the reasons are, because that to me is an odd day to have a wedding. So how would I approach it? So obviously every wedding is different from the partying standpoint, right? And so is one wedding, is it more a partying group than another wedding? If both weddings are party groups, you're in for a tough couple days. Because if you're going to throw and I know you are the wedding king. You should just be invited to weddings because you get weddings going. From the dancing standpoint, the drinking standpoint, you are a wedding guy. So I would hope that one of them was a little more low key than the other one. That way I would I still have to dress up and you have to go spend your time there. You're not as physically engaged with the dancing and the drinking that you would get a reprieve on one of the days. Like I said, I don't know these weddings. I don't know if both happen to be. I think she was in both weddings too. I think she was.
See,
if I'm not mistaken,
me was the real wild card. Is are you in both weddings or are you just a guest attending? Because if you're in it, those are long days, man, and those are long days. You have no other choice but to give your best effort because they're 2 people that, in theory, mean the same amount to you, as opposed to one wedding that you're in and the other you're just sort of a guest and can hang back in the periphery.
And for women, I mean, my God, how early they have to start getting ready. So that had to be just crazy for Jessie. Crazy.
Yeah.
Tough to do. But she did it because she's a stud.
Thoughts and prayers to Jessie. Ice up. She'll be back tomorrow to give us the full breakdown of that. If you appreciated this breakdown of college football's week 1, download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.